This is a continuation from a hearing that was held on Thursday of last week, September 20th. I think everybody knows the spill, but just for a little bit of background information, the subject property is at 22714 George Drive. The applicant is Art Lucas of Lucas Properties. And the three variances that we are considering is building height, the permission to use EFIS stucco, and the guidelines for open space dedication. So at this time, we're going to ask the applicant, Mr. Lucas, to come forward. He'll be able to give us background and summary, state his hardships for such request, and then we'll proceed there with any testimony from interested parties. Mr. Lucas.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry I wasn't here the other night. I had another commitment that I couldn't get out of, but the three variances we need, of course, the height, and the height is just a few feet above what the city says is the height issue, but we've been told that that's not such a big issue. And then the green space, this property is on a small, we designed it so it's on a small lot, but we'll have other space around it because there'll be a hotel, there'll be a restaurant, so there'll be plenty of green space, but it won't be on this particular property, but we own the property that's on both sides of it. And the third issue, I think, which is the big contentious issue, is our architect designed this EFIS stucco, and he told me it was a great product. It had a 20-year warranty, would self-clean itself when it rained, would hold up well, and he just thought it was a good product. And 20 years ago it had some issues. Termites would get into the product, but they redesigned it so that doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't go down to the ground anymore. It comes above the ground. It's a couple of feet above the ground. It's capped off. So the issues that were there was some litigation on it about 20 years ago. Those issues have gone away. So, but if I understand the code does not recognize EFIS in the code, EFIS is a fairly new product. That code has probably been around a while, I would think. Is that true? Is it?
No, the code said
is the code?
Code's 2006.
Oh, it was redone in 2006. But we can do Portland cement, which is what the code says, and I brought the builder here, Wayne Moxley, who has built a lot of things all over the Georgia coast, done a lot of work on Jekyll Island and Jessup and Brunswick, etc. And he's an expert. I was going to bring the architect, but the architect is on vacation in North Carolina. I'm thinking, why would you go to North Carolina right now and take a vacation? He had this week scheduled, and he was determined to go to North Carolina. But if that's an issue, we will, and I understand that the Portland cement is actually, it's less expensive for us to do it that way. But it doesn't have the warranty that the EFIS has. I mean, there's some other issues with it. Sometimes it cracks. But, you know, we're flexible. If that's the issue, it's easy to change the plan and just substitute the Portland cement. So, any questions or any comments?
What are the hardships?
I'm not sure I understand the term hardship.
Something that would, some extenuating circumstances.
To do what?
To be allowed a variance.
Well, we need to do it for the height requirement. We can't do this project and do the 12 condominiums unless we get a height exception. And but that's only a few feet. And
how high is that? The code calls for 35 feet currently.
Yeah. Well, it's, what is it, 41 feet, something like that, 42?
38.
38 feet. So it's barely over. And a lot of people have that exception. I understand. I mean, that's been an exception a lot of people have gotten. So we want to do it, if you do less than 12 condominiums, it's not economically viable to do. So that would be the hardship. You couldn't do it.
members, do y'all have?
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on just a second. Before we start with members from the public, board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Lucas at this time? No.
Well, I don't have a question, but I'll make a statement.
Charlie?
I appreciate your reconsideration of the exterior finish to the Portland cement. But as we discussed last week, it's apples and oranges. You were asking, I mean, one is a finish, EFIS is a finishing and insulating system. It's one subcontractor, right? You
If it is with the hard code, EFIS system.
Well, no, the person who applies the stucco, the sub who applies the stucco to this edifice is not going to be the same sub who does an alternative insulation.
I'm not sure what you're speaking to.
Well, how are you insulating the building?
The windows insulated inside the canopy.
Well, if that were the case, why would you use EFIS? That would be double insulation.
We're not using the EFIS for an insulation product, we're using the EFIS because it's a better application.
But EFIS is an insulating system.
But that's not the reason we want to use it.
That's why most people want to use it, because the energy code says it's the most, actually it has one of the highest ratings, Energy Star wise. A building that is built with exterior insulating finishing system, you know, it's impenetrable for heat loss and or gain.
Well, I agree with you, and that's why we want to use it. One of the reasons we want to use it, but the county.
I guess what I'm saying is that you would not use EFIS in that insulation. That'd be sort of crazy. The reason why people use EFIS is
We
because,
could use EFIS in that insulation.
well, then you're way exceeding our value.
Exactly.
But I didn't see back insulation on the wall sections. I didn't see it on the wall sections. I saw no designation. But that's beside the point.
Any questions right now, otherwise for Mr. Lucas from the board? Okay, Mr. Lucas, if you'll take a seat, then we'll ask members of the interested parties from the audience to come forward.
Can I say one other thing?
Yes, sir, of course.
We were delayed on this project for a good reason for the tree. We had time to find a solution to that. We hired arborists and we found out the roots were coming in the direction where we wanted to build, so we solved that problem. But that did put us behind about 2 or 3 months in doing that. So we're a little behind, and we need to get this launched as soon as we can. Obviously, we have to get a building permit to get started. We've already had 2 people commit to buying the condominium, and a third person we think will commit very soon. And we're telling them it's about 365 days from the time we get the building permit. So time is of essence, because you lose these contracts if you don't get going pretty quickly. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, housekeeping rules. In time limits of 3 minutes or less, you're able to come forward to the podium, state your name and your address, and then begin with your testimony. Dale, you want to step forward with what you're going to say?
I just actually had a question with regard to the height variance. Is your request for the height variance due to the ceiling height in the condominiums themselves, and as well is it due to the height in the parking deck? Is that the reason that instead of an 8-foot ceiling in the parking garage,
We
you're
are
going to
doing
make
8-foot
it taller?
ceilings.
Okay,
Yes.
so is that, to me, is a plausible reason?
And we're doing 10-foot ceilings because we really want to have an upscale.
Sure, of course.
And
That-
so
that
you
makes
didn't-
sense to me.
You make a good point. If you didn't do 10-foot ceilings, you wouldn't have a height issue. Now, we actually there are 4 floors. You have one that's underground, which is very expensive to do. That's where the parking is, there's storage there. But that's underground. And then we have 3 floors going up. But the condos are 10 feet ceilings. Yeah.
Cheryl, say something.
I just have, I'm with Charlie investigating EFIS more about how that material is. I had a house in Brunswick,
Yes, ma'am.
a beautiful house that was that material, and it was an older one where it had contact with ground and it had a subterranean termite problem and it was serious. I had to do a complete renovation. It was a beautiful home, but I know they've improved it, but there was some other problems with it. I know it was energy efficient, but it wicked up water. And I just wonder, I know that the house was built by a guy that owned a lumber company, and it was beautifully constructed, and it was a beautiful home. I know they've probably improved it in all these years. How has the material improved? And I know Charlie being an architect, right, the architect background,
Well,
how
art
has
is,
the material improved? I know they don't have it
art is
flushed
correct.
out.
You know, many of the problems associated with EFIS have subsequently been addressed with, we discussed this the other night, with a backwater wall, where moisture that comes from above makes its way towards the backside of the cavity and is dispensed at the ground floor level. The opposite problem is the water from below. You know, the water that comes in a heavy rain and settles next to you where the building meets the ground. And you did mention a moment ago that, and this is kind of a new point, because if I understand what you're saying, you're happy to go back to a cementitious.
We'll do the other.
So, this may be a new point, but you did mention that you were not going to bring, had you not backed off that request, you were going to bring that exterior insulating finishing system down, from 2 feet.
It's going to be a couple feet off the road.
But then what is from the ground up to the 2 feet? I didn't see that on the
Well,
elevation.
the architect, do you know what it was, what it
It would be brushed, it would be cement material, hanging in next to it.
Well, that's not reflected on the drawings right there.
But again, it's a new point, moot point,
That's right.
we can see.
Okay.
But the installer we use will be a certified installer,
Right.
and it will meet all the requirements of the system.
Mr. Lucas, do you want to make a modification to withdraw the variance altogether for the EFIS finishing?
If that is what the commission wants, we will do that.
Y'all want to discuss further on that before we move on to,
I wanted to ask
Well-
a question.
Hold on.
well, hold on one second, let me go, you start yours and we'll take it.
Well, it comes back to the hardship. I mean, you have to enunciate a hardship for deviating from the code. Now, from what you're telling us now, is that if you were to use EFIS, you were going to bring it within 2 feet of grade up. From our perspective, and I've reviewed these drawings many, many times, I've never seen a wall section that indicates what you said. If the drawings were resubmitted and showed a cementitious,
Larry Bryson, the architect, told me on the phone the other day, it goes 2 feet off the ground.
you
Now,
understand
I
what I'm
wish you could hear
saying? These are construction drawings.
Yeah.
These are drawings that you get to put in for a permit, for a building permit. It's not indicative of the drawing.
Okay.
So is that, You know, that's just something that you may have come in and showed us tonight. Here's the revised wall section. Here's the 24-inch cementitious. You know, and here's the EFIS.
What if we can see the hard code from the first floor down and leave us up?
I know you can do that, but we can't make a decision on conjecture and or just what you described without, it's not indicative of what's shown on the plans. That's all I'm saying.
But if we can see to just do away with EFIS altogether.
It's a major point. That's right.
We'll do that. If that's what the commission requires, we'll do that.
Well, it's not what the commission
Time-
requires, it's what
the
the
key issue is timing.
It's not what the commission requires, it's what the ordinance requires. And we're just looking for a hardship, and I haven't heard one yet, but it's a new point, because it sounds like you're pointing back, and you do not want to use that material. You're going to go to a cementitious exterior.
We will do Portland cement.
Right. There you go.
Okay. And
Good.
if we'd like to be approved, and then we can submit a letter saying, based on being approved, we have to do that. So that's, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay, Mike, would you like to?
Yes. The name is Mike Russell of 90114 George. If I could, first off, just for the record, I am for your project. Okay. Secondly, I want to clarify what the discussion just now was. Is the applicant withdrawing the request for a variance?
Yes.
For EFIS stucco only?
For
the
EFIS-
For the
for the
EFIS
EFIS,
material only?
yes.
So that is now not on the table.
That's right.
Okay.
We're looking at two
Okay.
variances.
In my opinion, the height restriction for the variance is a valid request, given the topography of the site. And then I do have an objection of the green space. Again, the point I made the other night was that the particular project has been limited to a very small site intentionally for other reasons, therefore has made the problem occur, forcing them to come to you for a variance on the green space. Had they made a site appropriate to the scale of the project and had enough to meet our standards, the code standards, we would have had enough green space in that particular parcel.
And
Yeah.
I think we have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Karen can back me on this, he does in fact have the 20% of green space in his plan that's required by the code. What he doesn't, and what he's asking a variance on, is letter G of Appendix C, number 4. It states, requires open space dedicated through the use of bond, conservation easement, or land donation to the city, or permanent deed restriction. And that is where Mr. Lucas is asking for a variance on that,
On that very limited.
on the open space dedication.
So my understanding is if we accepted or rejected that second variance, it would not affect your overall development plan. So the site plan would not change because you're meeting the 20%.
That's my understanding.
Is that correct?
It's, I've gone and calculated a number of times, and I come up with just under 20%. And the request for the variance is they don't, Mr. Lucas and parties do not want to put in effect the code requirement that says that 20% has to be guaranteed by bond, dedication to the city, or deed restriction. So if any one of those three things are accomplished, the green space is there. So why not
go ahead and
dedicate
do
it
that?
in a bond in a deed restriction?
Right.
May I ask a question, Chair?
Excuse me?
May I ask you a question?
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I ask the building
Yes.
department? Just a technical issue. On Mr. Lucas's request for the open space, does he specify the 20% as the issue, or does he specify how he's going to meet
This is
item number 4 in the following regulations?
this was the letter. We are asking for a variance on City Code, Appendix C, Section G, requiring open space dedicated through the use of bond, conservation easement, land donation to the city, or permanent deed restriction.
Okay, so that's.
So that's, and the original letter to them was City Code Appendix C, Section G requires open space dedicated through the use of bond, conservation easement, land donation to the city, or permanent deed restriction. The application letter did not address this. But the 20%, as I say, just under 20%, my calculation was 19.6%. Green space is available.
One issue here is that we're going to be doing, this is phase one. And the condominium is, and we moved it from next to the bridge over to the Franklin Road. But in the middle, it's going to be a hotel. And a lot of the space around the condominium, we think the hotel will use as the hotel grows.
It would grant the height variance to 38 feet.
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion from Board Member Potts. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second from Board Member Douglas. Do I have any discussion? All those in favor, right hand. Opposed? Motion carries.